water dialogues are helping us very, 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 very much.
The water dialogue, when coming into our municipality, it clearly assists the municipality in terms of seeing the level of service that it's rendering to the communities.
I never thought of dialoguing, that it can be such a beautiful thing that we have to make two enemies, if I may say, sit down together and talk and reason together and think together and listen to each other.
Over 1 billion people around the world do not drink safe water. Over 2.5 billion people do not have adequate sanitation. A key role of government is to find the best way to bring water to people. The challenge is formidable. The water dialogues is one pathway through the arguments, transforming people's differing opinions into a basis of a dialogue where participants agree to listen, question, and look at evidence together to see if it was enough to reach a new level of understanding.
The working group started somewhere in 2005 with key stakeholders coming together to define some processes in terms of helping municipalities to enhance service delivery. And that actually led to us defining a vision, kind of a problem statement in terms of which goals do you actually want to achieve. Well, the problem statement, we had really difficulties coming together to really define it, but ultimately this is what we've agreed upon, that municipalities in South Africa face many challenges in meeting the constitutional requirements to ensure effective, equitable, and sustainable delivery of water and sanitation provided affordably to all. This has taken into account the highly skewed distribution of wealth, service provision, and water resources. The effort to address these challenges, a number of different approaches to service delivery, including commercial approaches and private sector participation, have been used. The Water Dialogue South Africa provides the opportunity to create a constructive dialogue to identify, critically analyze and evaluate these approaches, leading to greater understanding of service delivery models. It is envisaged that this understanding will lead to more effective service delivery models to contribute to universal supply of safe water and sanitation.
Given that water service authorities have widely varying capacities, how do different institutional approaches, from public to private and everything in between, how does that affect actual outcomes of whether people get service delivery? We summarized our finding into different groupings of issues, including public participation, regulation and WSA, WSP relations, service levels, financing and affordability, and institutional arrangements. And we had some very specific things to say under each one.
The synthesis report had some interesting findings. We started to see things that we discovered early on in our research are actually now becoming issues of the day. People really expressed through the research, through the interviews, the need to want to have a say in the kind of services that they received, and wanted to have a say in how their service providers interacted with them, and wanted to be able to speak about the issues that were frustrating them, things like affordability and quality of service and responsiveness of local government. And so the dialogue showed the importance of creating a space for civil society and citizens to have a voice. It also showed a need for local government and service providers to be accountable to the citizens. When it comes to public participation, there were certain key findings, some being borne out now by the service delivery protests, people marching in the streets. Because local government hasn't given a space for civil society and communities to express their frustrations and their expectations, you're seeing this kind of protest. So what the research is saying is that we need to find a way to engage those formal civil society organizations, to give them a space to be able to input into process and policy development, so that communities really do have a say.
Participation versus meaningful participation, and what is meant by meaningful participation throughout the whole spectrum, so from national government all the way through to local. is something that really must be taken on.
Of key to me in terms of the findings are the fact that we need to strengthen local democracy. When I mean local democracy, just to ensure that there is a bottom-up approach where communities' needs are kind of highlighted, using a municipality as a vehicle to address them, and that two-way process becomes important.
We found that in almost every case that distinction between an authority and a provider, between the governance function and the doing function, was not there. And so the notion in the Water Services Act that the provider will be regulated by some other body is not in fact taking place. Equally, what we are finding is that if you create a Water Services Authority, the people that you use to staff that were once on the provider side, and so you end up with a weak provider if you have a strong authority. In the case studies that we looked at, Johannesburg had a form of Water Services Authority, but few of the others did. Ilembe notionally had one, but didn't have enough time to actually give attention to it. And if you don't have strong regulation, as we said earlier, then you find that you don't have strong enforcement of the contract. And so you don't get the kind of service delivery the contract envisaged. And that governance and provider function needs to be more clearly separated. But it's clear that this Water Services Authority provider construct is not working. Most municipalities don't know what their services actually cost. They have no direct fix on exactly what income they're getting because they don't have ring-fenced accounts. And equally, they don't know exactly what their services are costing. So we weren't able to find clear proof from the research that any authority is accurately covering its costs. Johannesburg possibly is the only exception, where they have a ring-fence system and accurately account for their income and their expenditure. You see many cases where the communities that we interviewed said that affordability was a problem. Whether it's Mauritius, Pafong, Ilembe, they were saying to us that the charges they were being expected to pay by the municipality were unaffordable.